ever since Jeep revealed they were going to be making a Rubicon 392, I knew I had to get one. Now at the time, I didn't know how I was going to get one. I just knew I was going to do whatever it takes. And since then, I've had this Rubicon 392 for almost 2 years now. And I've got to tell you, there's a few things I really think Jeep should have added from the factory. Now, it is pretty safe to say that the Rubicon 392 comes extremely well equipped from the factory. Straight off the lot, you get a lot of off-road capabilities in terms of front and rear lockers, some great technology for the axles, for its actual four-wheel drive control, and you get all of the safety technologies and all of the normal technologies and creature comforts on the inside. With that being said, there's a few things that I think Jeep just skimped out on. While we are on the outside, let's just go ahead and talk about the appearance. So for the Rubicon 392, as you guys can tell, it looks a lot like a normal Wrangler. Now, of course, on this, I have already added the 38 1550s, the 20x12s, and a few other little things just to make it look a little bit better. But what I really would have liked to have seen from the factory was at least a different fender flare. So the fender flares on these are just the standard Rubicon fender flares. Now, of course, you do have the option now of getting the Extreme Recon package, but whenever I first ordered mine, that wasn't an option. And I'm not talking about just adding a little piece of plastic onto the fenders. I would have really liked to have seen a completely different design for the Rubicon 392 just to help it stand out, much like a lot of you have seen on the new Broncos. Now, I'm not saying I want a fender that sticks out that much or that's that big. The fenders on the Bronco are a little bit gaudy, but I would have liked to see a more aggressive off-road oriented fender that maybe gives you a little bit more clearance, a different design, and just a completely different effect. I think that's something that Jeep could have easily done, but of course, since they mass produced so many Rubicons already, it was super easy just to throw the normal fender flares on. Now, another thing I would have really liked to have had on the Rubicon 392 from the factory is the 410 gear ratio in the axles. So, as many of you know, the standard gear ratio is 373, and it's just not as aggressive as I would like. Of course, with the 33s they come with from the factory, 373 is fine, and believe it or not, it's even fine with these 38 1550s. But really and truly, whenever you think of a Rubicon, you just instantly think of the 410 gears. I would have liked to have that. Now, they do have the option of getting the Extreme Recon package with the 456 gears, but if they're going to offer the 456, why not just give us the 410 standard? I think they could have been a little bit worried about the strength of the 410s in that standard size of the Dana 44, but if they're offering 456, obviously it shouldn't be too much of an issue. Now, the lower gear ratio you go, like from 373 up to 456, the smaller those teeth get. So it is more prone to braking, so I understand it from the original standpoint, but whenever they offered it 456 gears, I was like, obviously you're not too worried about strength. Why didn't you just give us the 410s? Now, while we're still on the outside, I want to talk about something a little bit controversial. I know a lot of people don't want this, but I personally do. Now, as you can see, we've got the color match hardtop on this. It is a 3-piece design with the Freedom panels up front. And as you can see on the very top right there, it is all color matched as well. Something I would have liked to have seen that they've started to do in the aftermarket community quite a bit more here recently is a version of like a clear lid for the Rubicon 392. Now, I still want to have the color match along the side there, but I believe they had plenty of opportunities to do a cutout on top with some plexiglass with some tint on it. That way, whenever it is in the normal sun, it's not going to be baking down on you, but so you can kind of see through. Almost something like what the Tesla roofs are, but just a cutout in the actual Freedom panels itself. So not to mess up the actual rigidity or anything like that, but I think a clear lid design for the Rubicon 392 would be really cool. Then they could offer it on other models as well, but that's just not something that we have available. You do have the aftermarket one-piece clear lid that you can get, which is pretty cool, but whenever you take that off to store, you can't really throw it in the back near as easily. So I do like how the Freedom panels break down into 2 pieces in the front. So if they could just cut out a little bit, throw us some plexiglass in there, that would be really cool, but we didn't get it. Now, to cover something that pretty much everyone agrees on, it is the all-wheel drive system for the Rubicon 392. Obviously, I'm sure they had safety in mind whenever they made this all-time all-wheel drive with the Select Track transfer case. That does come with the 3-7-2 transfer case instead of the normal 4-1 Rock Track transfer case. So we have the Select Track in this, and in all honesty, it works fine. I have had a way to tune in two-wheel drive, so basically it just doesn't let that clutch engage to engage the front-wheel drive portion of the all-wheel drive, so it stays in rear-wheel drive. That is a great option, but I would have really liked to seen something kind of like the WRX STI setup, where you can control the bias for rear-wheel drive and front-wheel drive, and you can determine how much power you want. I believe you can go all the way down to a 70-30 split, so 70 in the rear, 30 in the front, and you can really just set up the all-wheel drive the way you want. And I've always thought that is really cool in the actual Subaru WRX STI models. Something else they could have added with that, since pretty much the entire transfer case is operated electronically, especially for the four-wheel drive, would have been a simple two-wheel drive button. Obviously, that could bring up some safety risk. I'm not sure how that would play out, but it would be so awesome just to have a two-wheel drive button. That way you can lock it into two-wheel drive in the transfer case itself, just like the JL Taser does that I've installed, but it could do it from the factory. That's something that would have been really cool, and they had plenty of room to do it where the auxiliary switches are. I would have much rather had some extra buttons to control the all-wheel drive bias for front-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, and also a two-wheel drive button right there instead of those auxiliary switches, and we could wire up everything else just like normal or get another auxiliary switch to go somewhere else. So now just taking a peek onto the inside, you guys can see, like I already said, this thing is equipped extremely well from the factory. Now, this is the spot I was talking about where they could have put the all-wheel drive control for your bias, as well as your two-wheel drive option button, even a similar button as the Off-Road Plus or the sway bar disconnect, and you could have just got rid of those aux switches. And for the actual freedom panels, like I was talking about before, these cutouts right here on the inside of each side of the freedom panels would be a perfect spot to just cut out and put some plexiglass. I don't think it'd be that hard to do for Jeep, but they haven't done it yet. Now, since we are in here and we're already talking about these buttons down here, another thing I wanted to go over is there really aren't any different mode selections in the Rubicon 392. As many of you know, in vehicles like the Bronco Raptor, like the TRX, you have a bunch of different modes to go through. Everything like Baja to Sport to Mud to Snow, Sand, all that crazy stuff. And in the Rubicon 392, you simply don't. You do have Off-Road Plus, which is pretty cool. Whenever you engage that, it turns on your front camera. It also puts four-wheel drive high Off-Road Plus. It makes it active, but it doesn't really do much more than that. Of course, with this suspension, it's not going to change the way it handles or really anything. It does change your throttle control, so it takes a little bit less throttle input to get the input you're really desiring, and the steering changes just a little bit as well. I also feel like the transmission shift points change, and the paddle shifters are a bit quicker whenever you're doing things like that. Now, I don't think that they are going to add any extra really functions like that. I would like to see it. However, if they're not going to add any extra modes, I would at least like to see something a little bit different than just the off-road pages. Of course, in the Wranglers, we do have the off-road pages, but pretty much any other SRT-inspired vehicle or SRT vehicle, you have the SRT pages. So for us, we don't get that in the Rubicon 392. You even get it in something like the Grand Cherokee. Now, you can go through on your off-road pages and it shows you your drivetrain, what power is going where. It shows you if your axles are unlocked, if they're locked, sway bar disconnect, shows you your steering angle. It also has your accessory gauges, which is pretty cool. Then it does have your pitch and roll like a standard Wrangler. And then you've also got your trail cam. So it's a little different. I do wish they would add the SRT pages, but apparently that's not something that they're planning to do. And then one last thing just to bring it all home is definitely got to be the paddle shifters. So the paddle shifters on the Rubicon 392 are actually just little half paddle shifters. You can see right there, they're not full paddle shifters, and every time you turn the wheel, they go with the wheel. So I would have really liked to have seen the paddle shifters mounted here on the actual column itself, and they would have remained stationary. Along with that, a full-size paddle shifter right here would have been extremely nice, especially whenever you're going to use these in off-road situations or anything like that. Your wheel is going to be turned many different ways, and it could be turned all the way. With that being said, it puts the paddle shifters in the absolute worst positions they could possibly be in, and that's really the only time you'd want to use it, because on the street, to be 100% honest, they're pretty slow. Off-road, it is nice to be able to control your gear, your speed, everything a little bit more, but on the street, if you're trying to go fast, unless you're just trying to sound good, it's really better just to use the normal automatic transmission, or you can just shift down here. That has been a little bit quicker for me, but I thought that it would be really cool to have the paddle shifters mounted right here, stationary, and have a full paddle shifter. But whenever you're driving them like that, you'd be able to just put your hand up there and know exactly where that paddle shifter is going to be at all times. So that's just my take on what they could have done different to really make this 392 stand out and really compare to a lot of the competition in terms of the features and options they have out there. These things are expensive, so I feel like it's not too much to ask for a few more features. Now, if you guys haven't already, please like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you want to see next. But until then, Godspeed.